My husband kicked me out of our house in Highland Park, Dallas, with his mistress standing right beside him in the doorway. He didn't yell. He just said, "This isn't your home anymore, Claire," and shut the door before I could answer. I had $150 in my wallet. That was it. 6 years of marriage, and I walked out with less money than a week of groceries. Here's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself. It just waits until you're comfortable, then it takes everything at once. I stood on the sidewalk in front of the house I helped pay for, and Vanessa waved at me from the window like she was saying goodbye to a delivery driver. Ryan didn't even look back. I remember the heat of the concrete through my shoes, the sound of a lawnmower 2 houses down, how normal the whole street looked while my life came apart on it. A neighbor I'd waved to 100 times pretended to check her mailbox instead of meeting my eyes. Would you have begged? Would you have called a lawyer that same hour? Or would you have needed a minute to just breathe first? I want you to sit with that question, because what I did next isn't something I'm proud of or ashamed of. It's just what I did. I didn't call anyone. I walked 4 blocks to a bus stop and rode to my cousin Dana's apartment in Oak Cliff with a suitcase I'd packed in 11 minutes flat. I don't remember most of that bus ride. I remember staring at a gum wrapper stuck to the floor and thinking it was the only thing in my life that made any sense right then. That night, going through my bag, I found something I'd forgotten I still had. My grandmother's ring, sewn into the lining of an old coat pocket for safekeeping years ago. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was the only thing Ryan hadn't touched. I sat on Dana's bathroom floor and just held it for a long time. Not crying, just holding it like it could tell me what to do next. The next morning, I found out why he'd really thrown me out. Our joint business account, the marketing firm we'd built together, had been quietly drained over 4 months. $41,000 moved into an account with Vanessa's name on it. I sat at Dana's kitchen table, scrolling through statement after statement on an old laptop, watching the same pattern repeat itself. A withdrawal, then another, small enough at first that I understood exactly why I hadn't noticed. He hadn't just replaced me. He'd been robbing me the whole time and using her to hide it. Dana let me sleep on her couch without asking a single question that first night, and I'll never forget that kindness. But I remember lying there, staring at her ceiling fan, doing math in my head. $150, no job, no house, a ring I couldn't bring myself to sell yet. I remember thinking that the worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing I'd spent 6 years married to someone who'd been planning this for at least 4 months of it, maybe longer. What I did have was a folder, boxes of it actually, still in my car from when I'd cleaned up my desk at the firm 2 years earlier during a slow season. Every client contract, every account log, every email thread I'd CC'd myself on out of habit, not suspicion. Ryan always said I was too careful. Turned out, careful was the only thing standing between me and nothing at all. I spent that first week doing almost nothing but reading through those boxes. Not because I had a plan yet. I didn't. I just needed to understand exactly what had happened to me, in order, on paper, so it would stop feeling like something that had simply been done to me. By the end of the week, I had a timeline written out on a legal pad, dates circled in red pen. Ryan had met Vanessa at a work conference 14 months earlier. The withdrawals started 10 months after that. He'd been careful, but not as careful as he thought. Dana found me at that table one morning at 6 a.m., still going through statements, coffee gone cold beside me. She didn't say anything about how I looked. She just made a fresh pot and sat down across from me, and we went through the rest of it together. I sat on my cousin's couch that night with $150, a ring, and a business account that legally still had my name on the paperwork. Paperwork Ryan forgot I still had copies of. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought you'd just disappear quietly, I want to know, did you fight back right away, or did you wait? Tell me in the comments. And if this story is already hitting you in the chest, hit that like button and subscribe because it gets a lot bigger from here. It took me 3 weeks to get a lawyer to even look at the paperwork for free. Her name was Denise Coldwell, and the first thing she said was, "You still own 40% of that firm, Claire. He can't just cut you out." I hadn't let myself hope for anything in 3 weeks. Hearing that undid something in my chest I didn't know was still holding on. Denise explained that a real fight, forcing Ryan to account for the missing money, forcing a court to recognize my ownership stake, would take years and money I didn't have. I remember sitting in her office, nodding like I understood, while inside I was doing the same math I'd been doing since that first night on Dana's couch. I didn't have years to wait and do nothing. I needed to survive first and figure out the rest later. I took a job answering phones at a small property management office in Fort Worth. It paid barely enough to cover a room I rented above a laundromat. The washers ran until midnight most nights. I learned to sleep through it. I learned to eat cheap and dress plain and let people underestimate exactly how much attention I was paying to everything around me. I watched everything at that job. How real estate deals got written, how people made money on buildings other people had given up on. My boss, a tired but decent man named Harold, started letting me sit in on negotiations just to take notes. I took more than notes. I took mental copies of every mistake he made and every deal he almost lost, and I started noticing patterns nobody else in that office seemed to see. Which sellers were desperate, which buyers were bluffing, which contracts had room to push. For almost a year, I didn't buy anything. I just watched and saved every dollar I could. Some weeks living on rice and whatever Dana brought over from her own kitchen. I kept my grandmother's ring in a drawer by my bed and told myself I'd only sell it if things got worse than this. Things never quite got worse than that, but they came close a few times. 18 months in, Harold let me help negotiate a small deal, a run-down duplex nobody else wanted on a block everyone said was a lost cause. I put every dollar I had into it, every cent I'd saved living above that laundromat. It sold for triple what we paid within a year. I remember standing in the parking lot after the closing, not celebrating, just breathing, like I'd been holding my breath for 18 months straight. That first deal wasn't the moment everything changed, but it was the moment I understood something Ryan never did. Money doesn't come back to people who beg for it. It comes back to people who stop needing it to. 3 years passed. I stopped checking Ryan's social media. I stopped flinching when I heard someone say his name at a party. I bought my second property, then my fifth, then I stopped counting and just kept working. I left the property management office and started my own small firm, just me and one assistant, working out of a converted garage in Arlington. Dana told me once I'd changed. I didn't disagree with her. I also stopped being the woman who checked her bank balance every night out of fear. That took the longest to fix, longer than any deal or any lawsuit. Some nights I'd still wake up doing math in my head from habit, even after there was nothing to be afraid of. Old fear doesn't leave just because the reason for it does. I started seeing a counselor once a month, mostly to have someone tell me it was normal to still feel that way. I also started dating a little, cautiously. Nothing serious ever stuck, and for a long time I assumed that was about them. Looking back, I think most of it was about me not being ready to hand anyone that kind of trust again. Denise called me on a Tuesday, 4 years almost to the day after I'd walked out with $150. The lawsuit over the drained business account had finally settled, quietly, after years of delay tactics from Ryan's side. I didn't get the $41,000 back. Legal fees and time had eaten most of what a court might have awarded anyway. But I got something else. Full legal ownership of the firm's name and client list, because his lawyers had missed a filing deadline 2 years earlier. He hadn't just failed to steal the company, he'd handed me the rest of it, out of nothing but carelessness. I sat in Denise's office holding papers that meant I now legally owned the very company Ryan tried to push me out of. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. the way you feel after finishing something that took longer than it should have. Some of you already know what patience like this costs. It costs years, it costs nights where you wonder if it was even worth it. If you've ever rebuilt something from almost nothing, drop a comment. I read every single one. And if you want to see what happens when Claire finally goes back to Highland Park, don't scroll away yet. Like this video so more people see her story. I didn't plan to go back to Dallas, but my company won a contract managing a row of properties in Highland Park, 3 streets over from the house Ryan and Vanessa still lived in. I found out after the ink was already dry. There was no unsigning it. And honestly, some part of me didn't want to. I saw them before they saw me. Ryan looked older, tired in a way money used to hide well. Vanessa was on the front lawn arguing with a contractor about a payment that was 3 months late. Some things, apparently, hadn't changed at all. I sat in my car for a full minute before getting out, not out of fear, just to make sure my face wouldn't give anything away. I found out from a neighbor, almost by accident, that the marketing firm Ryan started after pushing me out had folded 2 years back. Without my client relationships, the ones I'd spent a decade building before he ever thought to take them, he had nothing left to run it on. The house on Maple Row, the neighbor told me, was already headed for a short sale. Ryan spotted me on the sidewalk outside the house that used to be mine. His face went through something complicated. Shock, then something that almost looked like hope. Like he thought I'd come back for him. "Claire," he said, like my name still belonged to him. "You look—" He stopped himself halfway through, maybe realizing there was no version of that sentence that would land the way he wanted. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I said, "I'm here for the contract, Ryan, not for you." Vanessa came off the lawn fast, heels sinking into the grass. "Is this some kind of joke?" she said, her voice already climbing. I looked at her, really looked, for the first time in 4 years, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, just a strange, quiet distance, like watching weather happen to someone else's town. Ryan asked if we could talk, just the two of us, away from the contractor and away from Vanessa. I told him there was much left to say that 4 years and a lawsuit hadn't already covered. He asked about the house, whether I'd take it back, whether there was any version of us that survived this. I told him the house had never been the thing I wanted back. He tried one more time, quieter, almost desperate, glancing over his shoulder to see if Vanessa could hear him. "I made a mistake, Claire. People change." I looked at him for a long moment, and I thought about the 18 months I'd spent above a laundromat, the years of rice and saved dollars, the folder of paperwork he never thought I'd need. "So did I told him. "That's the whole point." He didn't have anything to say to that. For the first time since I'd known him, Ryan Bennett was completely out of words. Denise had warned me this moment might come and told me not to expect it to feel like the movies. She was right. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like closing a door that had been open too long, letting the cold finally out of the room. Have you ever faced the person who hurt you after you'd already moved on without them? Was it satisfying, or did it feel like something else entirely? Tell me below, and stay with me because the last part of the story isn't the one you're expecting. I didn't destroy Ryan. I want to be honest about that because for a long time, I thought I would, and thought I'd want to. He kept a small condo on the edge of town, some savings Vanessa hadn't managed to spend yet, and whatever pride a man can keep after failing this publicly. Vanessa left him 6 weeks after I saw them on that lawn. Not out of any guilt, just math. There was nothing left to be near, and she'd never been the type to stay somewhere the money had stopped. I heard about it secondhand from the same neighbor who told me about the firm folding. I didn't feel much of anything when I heard it. That surprised me more than the news itself. I got the firm, I got the properties, I got a life I built with my own hands out of $150 and a ring I still haven't sold. But I also got 4 years I can't get back, and a version of myself that doesn't flinch anymore, doesn't trust easily, doesn't fully believe good things will stay. Some days that feels like strength. Other days it just feels like armor I never asked for, heavy in places I didn't know I could carry weight. Dana asked me last month if I was happy. I told her I was something steadier than happy, something that doesn't need anyone's permission to keep existing. She didn't push, which is one of the reasons I've kept her close all these years. She just squeezed my hand and changed the subject to something easier. Her kids, a recipe she'd ruined twice, the ordinary noise of a life that never got knocked sideways the way mine did. I think about that conversation more than I expected to. Happy always felt like a door I might walk through one day once everything's settled. What I have now doesn't feel like a door. It feels more like a room I built myself, brick by brick, and I'm still learning what it's like to actually live in it instead of just surviving inside its walls. I still drive past Maple Row sometimes, managing the properties there. I don't feel triumphant when I do. I feel like someone looking at an old photograph of a person she used to be. Not with hatred, not with longing, just recognition. That woman with $150 had no idea what she was capable of. I'm not sure I fully do either, even now. Sometimes I think about what I'd tell her, that version of me standing on the sidewalk with nothing but a wallet and a coat. I don't think I'd tell her it gets easier, because some of it never really did. I think I'd just tell her to keep the folder, keep every document, every receipt, every quiet piece of proof, because someday it will matter more than she can imagine standing there in that moment. Ryan texted me once, months later, just 3 words. "Are you happy?" I looked at it for a long time. Then I turned my phone face down and went back to closing out the day's paperwork. Some questions don't deserve an answer. Some silences are the only honest reply left. I don't know if what I have now counts as winning. I have more money than I ever thought I'd see. I have a company with my name on the door. I also have nights where the quiet in my house feels less like peace and more like the absence of something I used to have, even if that something was never really good for me. I think that's the part nobody tells you about getting everything you worked for. It doesn't erase what it cost to get there. It just gives you somewhere quieter to sit with it. There's a version of this story where I forgive him, where 4 years is long enough to soften everything back into something simple. That's not what happened. What happened is I built a life so full and so mine that there was never really room left over for forgiveness to matter one way or the other. Maybe that's its own kind of peace. I'm still deciding. I didn't come back to Highland Park to prove anything to Ryan. I came back because life just happened to bring me there, and I found out I wasn't afraid of that street anymore. If you've ever wondered what winning actually costs, I hope this story gave you something honest instead of something easy. Like this video, subscribe if you want more stories like Claire's, and tell me in the comments, was it worth it to you watching her get here? I read every comment, and I'll see you in the next one.